Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to another episode of Nightlight. Hope everyone had a good weekend and is off to a great start to the week. Has anyone attended a Civil War reenactment? The actors have accurately depicted or duplicated their uniforms, the commands and maneuvers, demonstrate what transpired on the battlefield, and such a faithful recreation displays for the audience the flaw of one side's strategy and how the other side took advantage of, the weakness, and the lesson is how the battle was lost, and eventually one side won the war. Or in another example, did you see the, I think it was an episode of Cheers, and it was one of the lady characters had a date with a Elvis impersonator, and Cliff Norman and the other bartenders were a little perplexed, and then the Elvis character said, "He's not an Elvis impersonator, he's an Elvis inspirator." And he said, "Hey, sweetie, could you make a peanut butter and banana sandwich for the king? Thank you. Thank you very much." And everyone, warmed up to him, and happy ending to the episode. So, my point is, if you weren't old enough to see Elvis's comeback special or to travel to Hawaii for the Aloha concert, maybe you've seen an Elvis tribute band at a local venue. The hours of studying Elvis's vocal techniques and moves may have made you more aware of his intimidating stage presence, and if he does, just say American Trilogy, you can gain a greater appreciation of Elvis's often overlooked gospel songs. So my friend Jimy Bleu is our guest tonight. He is a Jimi Hendrix historian. He is the frontman for the Kiss the Sky Hendrix tribute band. He is a DJ radio host in the New York City area. He's a music teacher, and he has an audio-video studio. And you can learn more about Jimy by going to kisstheskytribute.com or newdivinitysfc.com, or come out to Gergief's this Thursday night, just north of Pittsburgh, right off of I-79, and hang out with us. Hi, Jimmy. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you? And I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, I'm just thrilled that you're here. And before we get any further into the show, I do want to just take a minute to thank Gwen Toline from GHTcommunications.com for connecting us earlier this year. So, Jimmy, how did you become so interested in Jimi Hendrix?
Actually, I was a student at Performing Arts High School in Manhattan. That's the high school from the movie Fame. And it was located on 46th Street in Manhattan in Times Square. So I entered the school actually doing a James Brown tribute that I was doing since I was in junior high school. So I was basically into soul music and doing a lot of that, even first year and a half of high school. And then there was this girl, of course, it's always a girl, right? There's a girl who comes to school that I really wanted to meet and, get next to. And she was wearing this button, this big button, yellow button that said, official Jimi Hendrix fan club, Warner Reprise Records. Now, I had heard of Jimi Hendrix because I was into Sly back then, and basically I didn't know too much about him. So to get closer to her, I actually went up with her one time to Warner Brothers and joined the official fan club through the secretary of Mike Jeffries, which is Jimmy's manager's office. And basically that's how it all started for me. And then what made me switch my major from trumpet and trombone in performing arts to guitar in my junior year of high school was that I went by a friend's house. We used to go by people's house and partake in things that I'm not going to mention on the air. Have a good time. And so we went by this one friend's house, and just so happened her uncle came home and caught us. And so we in the room, it was he had this psychedelic bedroom, and then she was actually in his bedroom. So this guy came home unexpectedly, and he caught us. And so we're saying, okay, that's it for us, the end of the world for us. And he actually hung out with us a little bit. Then he took us in his editing room. He was one of the photographers for Monterey Pop Festival.
Wow.
So this guy had the raw footage. I saw a lot of raw footage of the acts that were in Monterey Pop. We're sitting in the room, and I'm waiting to see Otis Redding because I was still leaning towards soul music. And so we're going through, he's like scrolling through The Who and all of these people, and I wasn't too much into rock back then. And then all of a sudden comes up to Hendrix.
Yeah, I'm here.
Mark?
Yes.
You're set to go again. I don't know what happened.
Okay. Jimmy, so you saw the raw footage from Monterey, and when you got to seeing Jimmy's performance, that's where the call dropped or something happened. What? Okay, maybe pick up from there.
Well, no, that's basically it. I said that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Then that's basically it. That's the whole story there.
Okay, so last month I saw you and Zoso, the Led Zeppelin tribute band, at Fairmont's Palatine Park, and you did about an hour from just over Jimi Hendrix's career, and but the first time I saw you perform was at the Bearsville Theater on and to commemorate Jimmy's birthday, and you did a live stream, and you recreated about 4 sets from some of his legendary concerts. Where did you get that idea? Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of each of the shows that you do, and the different musicians that you have come out and play with you?
Well, yes, but even before I get into that, it's more Just the Sky is in a tribute band. We call ourselves the Jimi Hendrix ReExperience. And I always say to the audience jokingly that you guys didn't get it the first time because it went by so quick. So we're going to make sure you get it this time. And the reason why I say that is because if you've gone to a Broadway play and you've seen, you was mentioning this earlier in your opening about the Elvis thing. If you've seen Beatlemania and you've seen like a Night with Janice on Broadway, that's what Kiss the Sky is. We recreate Hendrix's iconic concerts from before he got famous at Monterey Pop. When he was in England, and we do Monterey Pop. We do his Fillmore years, including the band of Gypsies where he used other musicians. We do his Woodstock concert at some of the festivals. We play outside. And we also do the Final Cry of Love tour. So we recreate all of the important iconic concerts in full era costume and full era equipment. Light show, videos in between. The show that you saw at the festival you were talking about recently was also, we wasn't able to do that. We just came out and just did an hour experience set because we were opening for Zoso. But that's what we usually do when we do the theaters, like we'll be doing at Gergief and things like that. But even at Gergief, we won't be doing the full production that we do. We'll be doing a couple of things.
Okay, with Monterey, the concert at Monterey, that Jimmy was getting pretty established after he had Chaz Chandler took him to England. Jimmy honed his craft there, and he returned to America for his debut for an American audience. But he's introduced by Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones. That seemed to have been about 3-4 year relationship with the Stones. Who were some of the other people that really seem to have become friends, nurtured him, become friends with Jimmy while he was in England?
Okay, the England years, that would be the most important friends, I always say, is Paul McCartney and John Lennon. They were Hendrix's best friends. A lot of people are not aware of that. Matter of fact, Paul McCartney doesn't do a concert to this day where he doesn't give homage of at least a good 5 or 10 minutes to Hendrix. That's how close they were. And, like you mentioned, a few of them, people from the Stones and things like that, people like that. There were so many, even coming here to America, if I have time, I'll touch on some of the famous progressive jazz musicians who were befriended Hendrix really closely, and one person that will connect this whole show, Barbara, especially Barbara's website, to Jimi Hendrix, which people are not used to thinking of him in a spiritual sort of light. But one person, Timothy Leary, they were really good friends, and I know a lot of people today think of Timothy Leary as a wacko, but keep in mind, Timothy Leary was involved in the Gergief work through Willem Nyland, who is, I'm involved in the work, that's why I know this, who was basically close to Gergief. So, I mean, you might want to look at this guy differently now that I've said that, because he's responsible for Jimi getting more into the Gergief Foundation as well. So right there, right, you know, that's a whole show in itself, what I just said. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of important people who befriended this guy, because about a year and a half before Jimi died, he was the highest paid rock performer, even more than the Beatles and the Stones of his time. So he attracted a lot of people to him. Now, true, most of these people were left a lot to be desired, but some heavy people were in his satellites, let's say.
Okay. When you're talking about George Gergief, what are some of the tenets of the movement that he founded?
The basic tenet that I could say very briefly is we are not all we can be, and that through certain work on oneself, we can at least come to attain that potential through the work. We can't leave it by itself. Nature develops us to a certain point and then leads us to either degenerate or stay as we are, or to develop further. And that's what the work is all about. And a good example is, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm involved in something internally to keep me present so I don't shift into automatic pilot. That's one of the basic tenets right there.
Okay. It seems like there's like a element of Eastern mysticism behind the philosophy, and what I noticed is I was preparing for this show was how much Jimi wrote about religious themes, women, angelic savior type figures, God is a woman. It seems like Jimi is going back farther to his African heritage, and we get into his a little bit of his Cherokee heritage too. But is Gergief's philosophy helping Jimi to just look at some of the like spiritual concepts that from legends of Atlantis and Egypt?
Actually, it's interesting you said Egypt because Gergief has a philosophy that's called the fourth way. There are three traditional ways, and Gergief is basically the fourth way. There's the way of the fakir, like you see in India. There's the way of the monk, and there's the way of the yogi. They each are ways of development, and they each leave something out. Well, Gergief is the fourth way that brings these three together, and also some. And Gergief always says that his fourth way teaching is esoteric Christianity, thousands of years that existed before we know Christianity in ancient Egypt. That's where he says his fourth way teachings come from.
Okay. If the listeners heard Barbara's live show yesterday with Scott Crichton, or looking for something to do after tonight's show, yesterday's talk was really very interesting about the pyramids, and he did bring up during the discussion about some of these, like the Egyptian scribes, and I think there was an example from Greenland and Plato, or the Sumerian author had documented some kind of like pole shift, and where the sun was rising in the west and setting in the east. There were some interesting unnatural things that were documented a long time ago. And there was a passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 24, where he's talking about that day Yahweh will punish above the armies of the sky, below the kings of the earth. And it's kind of like as above, so below type philosophy. But when I heard Scott talking about that, I was thinking that sounds almost like the title of the somewhat recent studio outtakes that are on the Jimmy CD, Both Sides of the Sky. Is Jimmy, is there something like that, being able to see on both sides of the sky in Gergief's philosophy, or is there something like that influencing Jimi Hendrix in this like 1970 time period?
Yes, Jimmy was involved in working on himself, weaning himself off of hard drugs, and I don't know the effect. No, really, nobody knows, because he died, so we don't know if he was able to attain a certain development for something to live on after his death. We don't know that. That's his own personal journey. But I do know what he was involved in. He passed on some of that to a few people, one of them who is still alive today. So, I mean, yeah. And also, let me go back a little bit, because you mentioned Hendrix's outtakes and CDs and things like that. I basically concentrate on the Jimi Hendrix as far as musically, and this really really doesn't sit well with a lot of Hendrixonians, I call them. I basically concentrate on Jimmy's first 3 albums.
Mm-hmm.
After that, that's what we're hearing. We're hearing unfinished songs, outtakes, studio jams, and things like that. Actually, Jimmy was going through a lot more than any other of the rockers that we mentioned earlier, because he had more potential being a black rocker, especially with white musicians. Back then, I mean, today that's a no-no, but back then, I'm surprised the guy didn't get lynched. You know, he was basically very open about his lifestyle, and he was very dangerous to the powers that be because he was bringing races together. That is so important. I have to say that again. He was bringing different races of people together, and that's a very dangerous idea. And then to infuse, maybe, let's say he lived longer, to infuse these people with a certain consciousness, very dangerous. So he was getting back on track before he died. He reached out to his original producer, Chaz Chandler. He realized he was going nowhere, and he was in bad management. Government was harassing him. And so he reached out and he said, look, could you help me? I want to get back in, in the swing of things like when it was before. And Chaz finally, he was against it for a while. But finally he said, okay, I'll tell you what, bring me the masters. Let's talk about it. And then Jimmy died. So we at least know he was on his way to getting back on track,
What I find really revealing about all these partially finished songs, ideas that there was something there, but it never really finalized. They're really, you can see where in 1969, Jimmy was doing something, changing, that it shows up on Electric Ladyland, and you can see in these new studio CDs that have come out over the last 10, 12 years or so, that he must have been writing all kinds of poetry, developing a lot more than people ever realized how much he was evolving as a person, spiritually, creatively. And I think a lot of these, like People, Hell, and Angels might be one of the better examples that documents how much insights he offered to people to give them a better outlook on life, frame of mind, whatever term you want to use.
Yes, there of course gems here and there, but you have to be very discerning when you listen to that stuff. When I do the meet and greets and people come and tell me, oh, I'm into Hendrix, how can I get more? And I didn't know he was this deep, and I didn't know he blah blah blah. Especially when I do my lectures, and they say, how can I get more into him? I'm like, get the first 3 albums and you'll be straight. Everything else is icing on the cake. Get the first 3 albums, because that's when he counted. That's that music is still very effective today when you hear it today. There's something there that doesn't sound like most of the other rock music you listen to. There's something there. There's a mysticism there that can't be put into words that still makes this music quite viable. Especially like you mentioned, the poetry. There's poetry in his lyrics when you like really put on headphones, listen to his lyrics, the stuff, especially his ballads. Listen to the stuff he's writing about. It's like pure poetry, you know.
Mhm.
That's why he admired Bob Dylan, because Bob Dylan was the same way with his lyrics.
Okay. Of the first 3 CDs, which one is your favorite?
I don't do the favorite thingy. He did ReExperience was the first album. Then that same year, really, was Acts as Bold as Love. It was a whole different type of a vibe. Then you had the album you mentioned, Electric Ladyland, which was had some jam. He liked to get in the studio and jam, so it had a lot of that on there. He had some of his old friends come and join him on that album as well. People like Brian Jones, Stephen Stills, I believe, is on it. I mean, Al Cooper, Jack Cassidy. You know, these are really big, heavy hitters back then in the day. And so he had them join him in a jam atmosphere. There's a song you were talking about Atlantis. There's a song that he makes reference to things like that, and a song called 19. This is the title of the song. 1983, a merman I shall turn to be. I mean, it takes you on a journey of the destruction of the planet and, you know, surviving, going underwater to survive that. Basically what the song about. I mean, it's the poetry in that is just amazing. The music matches the poetry. He goes into a jam there. I mean, that's the album. That album was not by accident, Mark. Matter of fact, you mentioned. Just before that album, he ran into a famous progressive jazz musician whose name is Sun Ra. A lot of your listeners may not be familiar with Sun Ra. Sun Ra was a jazz keyboard player, piano player, who's into the ancient Egyptian teachings, and spoke highly, you know, about this, and spoke about the actual teachings a lot. Did a concert at the site of the pyramids and everything. And he influenced a lot of jazz musicians, a lot of famous heavy hitters. I can go down and list from Miles Davis, Rashawn Kirk. I can just go down and list of the people this guy changed their direction musically when they met Sun Ra. Well, the same thing happened with Jimi Hendrix. Jimmy, all of a sudden we have the first 2 albums, like I mentioned. ReExperience, Acts as Bold as Love. Then something totally different, Electric Ladyland. Even the title, Electric Ladyland, female energy, which is what he was into. Matriarchal female energy. And the whole album is just oozing with that.
I think, was it like Earth Blues has a lot of similar image, the matriarchal imagery in the lyrics? But
yes, and you're talking about later, more of his later things that came out after he died, actually. But yeah, and it's politically as well, you know, attentive as well. So but that was later. I'm talking about while he was alive and what he really pushed as new concepts. Matter of fact, the stuff that you were talking about, Earth Blues and that period that he was coming out with, Cry of Love, these were released after he died. The First Rays of the New Rising Sun. These were songs he was working on when he died, that they said, okay, the guy's dead, let's master these and mix these as best we can and put it out there. And then I didn't know this until I started touring with the bass player, Jimmy's bass player, Billy Cox, that Jimmy was in England on the phone with Billy almost every day, like making changes, like, hey man, we're going to change okay, instead of going to the bridge, I want to blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're going to change this part and blah, blah. Those songs were not going to sound like the way they sounded when Jimmy got through. He was supposed to come back to America and work on those songs. So you're hearing basic, what I call demos that you do, before you actually do the album. That's what you're really hearing.
I enjoy them as much as the first three CDs, but with Electric Ladyland, you really do hear something totally different, and there was like almost all the members of Traffic were on one song or another. They're like one of the top bands. 1969 or Jack Cassidy from the Jefferson Airplane, and you see a lot of bands at that time working together. Clapton did the While My Guitar Gently Weeps with the Beatles. So it just seems like there were a lot of people just wanting to collaborate, and Jimmy's part of it, where he's just helping to bring people together instead of keeping the band separate from everyone else. And he may have started the trend, or just gotten involved with doing the same thing, but he really maximized his friendships with so many other people. Stephen Space on one of the outtakes too, Somewhere from the People, Hells, and Angels CD.
Yeah, Stephen Stills was very close to Jimmy. He's on a few things, as a matter of fact. That's something different that you mentioned. That's where the mysticism really started to kick in for Jimmy. And you're right, he attracted so many different people who was in his orbit, because they considered him a musical shaman. This is the way they really considered Jimmy. That's why the title of my lectures is American Guru. This was the guy. If there was going to be somebody to bring people together like that, this was the guy who was capable of doing that through his music. That's where he was going. And that was very important to him. When he looked out, his bass player, Billy Cox, told me, when he used to look out in the audience and see mostly white people in the audience, it bothered him. He wanted more people, different, like Asians, blacks, Latino. He wanted different people, different age, maybe different age groups. So his music was changing in that direction to include everybody. And unfortunately, he died before he can even get to really realize that, to make that happen. I always compare him with Bob Marley, who was a little bit more successful in that. And Bob Marley used reggae music, but he just didn't use reggae, regular reggae. He used Rastafarian mystical reggae. If you've ever been to Jamaica and, like I have, and went up in the hills to meet these Rastas, it's totally different from the people in town. These people live off the land, very communally. The music is quite different. The reggae music is quite different, and that's what Bob Marley tapped into. As a matter of fact, he got in trouble by those Rastas for doing that, for making it commercial like that. So that's pretty much what Jimmy was doing. And the thing is, Bob Marley was Jamaican. Jimmy was American. He was a black American. So that's, what I said, that's what made him quite dangerous.
Okay, and speaking of his collaborators, he was already friends with Paul McCartney and John Lennon, but Paul's wife, Linda Eastman, would also do the photography for some of the photography for Electric Ladyland. So there's another Beatles connection, and it's just really interesting how many people Jimmy is collaborating with over such a short period of time.
Indeed. Matter of fact, speaking of Linda Eastman, she and Jimmy dated. He met her at the scene. You can Google that. That's common knowledge. No, they dated, and so there you have a connection with Jimmy with the Beatles again, and also the reason why we're sitting here having this conversation about Jimi Hendrix is because of one woman who believed in him and groomed him so she can bring people down to take them to the next level. And that woman was the girlfriend of Keith Richards of the Stones. Her name is Linda Keith. She was a model. And she met Jimmy and actually gave Jimmy one of Keith Richards' guitars, and she would dress Jimmy before the gig and got him to sing more. She actually groomed him into the Jimi Hendrix we knew, because she was bringing people down. She brought two different people down before she brought Chas Chandler down to see Jimmy play live. It was Chas Chandler who saw the potential in Jimmy and took Jimmy to England. But Linda brought a few other people down, and they said, nah, we don't think there's nothing there. You know what I mean? But she groomed Jimmy and made him, concentrate on him more, because Jimmy was basically just a sideman playing with the different groups that played with quite a few soul bands. So he wasn't really front man. Yeah, he wasn't. I mean, he'd done it here and there, but it was Linda Keith who made him, oh, no, you're up front. It's the show's about you, blah, 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 blah. Just do your tricks with the guitar. You don't have to do them behind another singer no more. Boom, get out front and do your stuff. And that's why we're talking about Hendrix to this day. It's because of that one woman. And she, luckily I saw this film, All Is By My Side, I think, and they do mention this. So there are some bios that mention this, and that film does spend some time on this. But usually this is left out of the equation when you talk about Hendrix, and that's this woman's very important. And also one other thing I'd like to say briefly too, you would mention about the important collaborations. Are you familiar with Alice Coltrane?
I've heard her CD that she did with Carlos Santana, but I'm not all that familiar with who she is.
Okay, yeah, I was going to bring that up, but just a little bit about her. She got into the Hindu teachings after her husband John Coltrane died. And she became a guru. She actually moved to California and started her own commune with followers. As a matter of fact, I believe the commune is still active today. She died some years ago, but I believe the commune is still active. And she was considered a spiritual leader. She played harp, she played organ, mainly harp, and she sang, and boom. So just before she did that album you mentioned with Carlos Santana, who, by the way, when he collaborated with Alice Coltrane, she affected him so much, he changed his name from Carlos Santana to Devadip, which is a Hindu name. That's how much this woman affected him. Well, she spoke at my high school, Performing Arts. Performing Arts was known to have very famous people back then come to the school when they were in New York and speak at the school. A lot of music schools do this, but back then, a lot of these people were still alive. So they would stop by Performing Arts and, either speak to an assembly, or we did a special little small class with them with say something to us. Alice came by and she spoke to us in assembly. And she said at that assembly, and this was before she did the Carlos Santana collaboration, she said that she reached out to Hendrix to do a collaboration, but she kept getting the runaround from the management. So she called Miles Davis and she said, how do I, because Miles Davis and Jimmy were tight, so they were actually playing together sometimes and things like that. So she said, how do I get him? So Miles gave her another number, but she still was getting the runaround. So she just, she said, okay, forget it. I guess it's not going to happen. And she eventually reached out to Carlos Santana. She wanted to reach out to rock musicians specifically other than jazz musicians. She felt that was very important. Very gifted woman. Just listening to her talk about music and spirituality, you're lifted to another level.
Okay, and since you were just talking about Miles Davis, did Jimmy have any influence, or was he influenced by Bitches Brew? That's just like one of those all-time great albums.
Well, Bitches Brew is a seminal album that actually actually formalized the word fusion, fusion jazz and fusion rock. But that was the album that really did it. And Jimi Hendrix was supposed to be on that album. Not only
was he
Jimi
really?
Hendrix, Sly Stone as well. Those three were hanging out together for a period of time. I got a month and a half, something like that. Now, I'm going to say that again. Miles Davis, Jimi Hendrix, and Sly Stone were hanging out together. Just imagine the conversations of music other than the partying they did. But just imagine. So anyway, yes, Jimmy was supposed to be on Bitches Brew. What happened is Miles Davis's wife, Betty Davis, who is also a singer as well, and she introduced Miles to Jimmy. She introduced that whole rock movement. Miles was wearing suits and ties, totally jazz player, and she introduced Miles to that whole rock thing that was happening back then. So Miles changed his whole, not only fashion, attire, but he changed his whole sound, even putting a wah-wah on the trumpet. Everything changed with Miles, and that's because of her introducing Jimi Hendrix to Miles. So Miles says this in his bio. This isn't just me saying this. He thought that Betty Davis and Hendrix were having an affair, which they were. I said it. I'm going to say it. But basically, so that's why he, at the last minute, he booted Jimmy off the sessions and got John McLaughlin to do the album. And it was Quincy Jones, the famous jazzman Quincy Jones, who was responsible for bringing Hendrix and Miles together again after that, because they wasn't even, there was no friendship pretty much after that. And it was, Quincy said, you guys are too important to what you're doing in music for this childishness, and got them at least back together. That's why you see Miles at Jimmy's funeral.
I did not know that. Fascinating. Okay, so so Bitches Brew and Electric Ladyland, they're about contemporary. Then we go on to Jimmy headlining Woodstock, and the announcer didn't even know the name of the band. He got the wrong name of the band out over the PA system.
Yeah.
it was no longer the Jimi Hendrix Experience. It was Gypsy Sun and Rainbows.
Yeah, that was the name of his what I call a jam band. He wanted to explore totally a new sound. He rented a house 2 weeks before that concert in Woodstock area, actually in Boisville area, and he was exploring. He was jamming every day and exploring the new sound that he wanted to get into. He had an African-influenced percussionist, and he had a Latin guy, Spanish guy, percussionist. So that right there, he had two percussion players playing with him, and both of these guys are my best friends today. And he also had another guitar player, Larry Lee, playing an old Army buddy. So it was, a five-piece band, and he was exploring. But to tell you the truth, Mark, Jimmy didn't know the name of the band. I mean, these guys were basically, they were getting high and jamming, and then, okay, let's go do the concert. And to be honest, it's a lot of the stuff was loose. It was a very loose performance. The thing that really stands out from that performance is his version of the Star Spangled Banner, which he had done many times previously and after. But it was just something about that performance because of the times then, that whole Vietnam time that was happening there. So that, turned out to be an iconic protest, real good statement on what the country was going through at that time. Just that one song. You know what I mean? You're getting everything. It's like an opera. You're getting everything in that one song. The screams, the pain of war, the bombs, all of that.
Not long after Woodstock, Jimmy was on the Dick Cavett show, and it was called something like an unorthodox performance, and Jimmy took exception to the use of that adjective. It was just presented in a song was presented in a different way. It wasn't bad or good or not being judgmental about it. It's just this is how he wanted to do the song. It's a classic moment in rock history.
Oh yeah, very iconic. Very iconic for the time.
And you also when Jimmy did his Woodstock performance, he's wearing that white jacket. Can you tell us a little bit about the making of that coat? I remember you talking about that when we did the Three Beards show.
Yes, actually, the woman who made that jacket, there's actually two of them. But Colette, his girlfriend, she's also a friend of mine today. And basically, her and her partner, Stella, they used to have a store, a fashion store, that was a few blocks from the Fillmore. And all of this, the who's who of the music world used to hang out there. As a member of the fan club, I was there like maybe 4 times. And back then I'm 15, 16. We used to love going to the store because it was a mainly women's fashion store. Matter of fact, her later clients included Cher, and she had these, high fashion clients. But the women would come to the store, and they would see something they like, they would take off their clothes right there. And she had like this little, Chinese screen or something, but they would like take off their shirt or take off their, their pants or whatever right there and try the thing on. So, us little kids, that was like heaven to us. So we used to love going there to hang out, basically just to see that. I mean, the first time I saw it, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow. So when I hooked up with Colette again, I interviewed her on my radio show, and we hooked up again after that. We had a good belly laugh about that because that's what it was about. But they made that jacket for Jimmy. They made quite a few of Jimmy's clothes. They made a few of his pants and things. But they also made clothes for Miles Davis, Johnny Winter. The list goes on. A lot of people used to come by that store. It was a very matter of fact, the store didn't have no name. It was just a store in the village, and you knew it was a store because when you walked by, you see things in the window, and you just went in. But there was no sign, there was nothing over, no title or nothing, and it was a hangout. Very, very, very good place. And Stella, her partner Stella, is actually the wife of Stella Douglas. She's the wife of Jimmy's later producer, Alan Douglas, who I also befriended just before he died. From being on my radio show.
Okay, and speaking of Colette also making clothing for Johnny Winter, Johnny was a guest on your show. What did you learn from Johnny about Jimmy? They did the song "Things I Used to Do." I don't know if that's their only recording, but they did play together from time to time. Both are Woodstock alumni. What were Johnny's recollections?
Actually, I got to speak to Johnny when he was. Not the Johnny Winter we know. I saw Johnny maybe 5 or 6 times, and he was always one of my favorite. But by the time I interviewed him, he was a shadow of who he used to be. He used to come out on stage at B.B. King's and sit in a chair, and it was sad to watch because he was on his way out. So when I got to interview him, he didn't know who I was, and just another guy wants to speak to him. So he would give me one-word answers. I'd be like, yeah, so Johnny, blah, 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 blah. Yes. Yeah, so what did I do? No. I was like, wow, this is getting nowhere. So I just out of nowhere, I forgot how I even brought it up. I said, Johnny, I have a lot of respect for you, man, because I go way back with you. I was at those jams that you did with Jimmy at Steve Paul's. The guy lit up. He was like, what? Well, so then he started to open up more. Then we started to talk about those jam sessions in which Jimmy played bass on most of that. When Jimmy jammed with these different people, you mentioned Stephen Stills and just so many, B.B. King and things like that. Well, B.B. King, he did play guitar, but he really liked to play bass. He really got on the bass. He'd grab somebody's bass and play the bass. He didn't like to play guitar when he jammed a lot. So with Johnny, it was jamming, but there were a few times I saw him jamming at the scene there, and they were face to face. Like that's what really made Johnny light up when I mentioned that, how they were like in each other's face. Oh, yeah, you did that? Okay, well listen to this. All right, I got this. And that's what made those jams really fly, because they both were going at each other in a friendly, competitive way. You know what I mean? It was something to be there to see that. And in my opinion, Johnny always bested Hendrix. That's my personal opinion. Johnny was on fire back then.
Well, and when was that? Was that before Woodstock or right afterwards?
Man, Yeah, I would have to look at my notes for that. I couldn't really tell you specifically. I was at the scene. The scene was a club on 46th Street in Manhattan. Everybody was there. Matter of fact, that was Jimmy's first gig in New York when he first came to New York. The Jimi Hendrix Experience with Noel and Mitch was a gig that they did there, but everybody was there. B.B. King did gigs there, even Sammy Davis Jr., just so many people. So it became a jam spot, after hours jam spot. It became very famous, and that's why a lot of people went. So I was there quite often. It was a little hole in the wall. It's like we used to call it the belly of the beast. You know, you just go down these stairs. It was like you're in hell almost. You know what I mean? But it was small and funky, and everybody was there. Who, you know, anybody you can imagine. I remember seeing Joan Baez there. So just so many famous people were there. You know.
Well, you were just talking about the venue, the scene. What about the Fillmore? There's the band of Gypsies at the Fillmore, and then the recent release of the first show, that New Year's Eve concert. And you do recreations of the Fillmore concerts. What was that venue like? Is that still around? You know, what was the importance of those concerts for Jimmy's career?
Oh, it was very important in his career. It's Billy Graham, who ran the Fillmore, really admired Jimmy, and just like he admired a lot of the other acts who were there, Santana, the Grateful Dead. He really, stood up for these acts. We owe Billy Graham a lot. No, the place isn't there now. I think it's a bank there on the corner. But I remember quite a few of the concerts there. Matter of fact, before I really got into Hendrix, I joined the Jimmy's fan club in 1968, just after the release, a few weeks after the release of the Electric Ladyland album. And basically that's when I joined. But in 1968, a few months before that November, I was there to see actually Sly. And Sly Stone opened for Hendrix. And basically, I was there. Jimmy had a bad night because Sly burnt the place down. That's the only way I can describe it, Mark. He played for his life at that concert, and by the time Jimmy came on, a lot of people were not paying attention to him. He had equipment problems. Some people were like actually walking out and I was there. So some people will talk about, oh yeah, Jimmy, Sly open for Jimmy, Jimmy Bleu, but they're not being objective. You know what I mean? Objective and impartial. You really get to, first of all, you have to be that way with Hendrix because of what was happening to him. Like I said earlier, behind the scenes with his management, with the government and things like that. So you have to be very impartial when you talk about Hendrix. A lot of people are not. They're, oh yeah, Jimi Hendrix, yeah, he was God and blah 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 blah. And like you had mentioned the Fillmore Band of Gypsies, which we recreate. That album, the Band of Gypsies album, most of it is spliced together. That's how bad Jimmy was at that. And when I say bad, I don't mean in a good way. That's how unrehearsed and loose the band was at that concert, that they had to splice a lot of that album together. Matter of fact, the producer, Eddie Kramer, should win an award for that splice job. Now, there are some songs that were left alone, like the famous Machine Gun, which stands right up there with Star Spangled Banner. That's yikes. When you hear that tells about, You want to find out about the war years and all of that, listen to that song with headphones. You'll get an idea. But yeah, like I said, that album spliced together. And you can actually hear some of the bad splice jobs in a few of the songs, like Message of Love. You can hear it's not, they miss a splice right there. So if you really know the engineering work on that, you'll know it's a splice job.
Okay. With all of the other studio outtakes that we've mentioned, and other CDs that have come out, like the Winterland Ballroom CD. It seems like Eddie Kramer has been there for working with Jimmy's music for over 50 years now.
Mm-hmm.
What was their relationship like? It just seems like he's basically made a career out of producing Jimmy's music and engineering his music. What do you have any? Can you bring some insights into how Eddie worked?
Well, deservingly so. He deserves whatever he made a career out of, because he was important to getting that Jimi Hendrix sound. A lot of ideas that Jimmy wanted, otherworldly ideas, especially experimental, spaceship sounds, and just mystical things and other dimensional sounds with the guitar. Eddie was able to, okay, I'll tell you what, let's put it through here and let's try this. And so they got along fantabulously, really. And it was because of Eddie that a lot of those sounds that we hear that Jimmy was able to do on those records. That's what makes those records. He was very important to helping Jimmy. He worked very well with Chaz Chandler. I interviewed Chaz as well, and Chaz loved him. So, yeah, that was a team back then. Like I said, especially for the first 3 albums, it was a team that shot Jimmy to the top. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, what about the band of Gypsies with Billy and Buddy? What did they bring to this newly formed trio that was, may not have been there so much with Noel and Mitch?
A more earthly sound, which Jimmy wanted to explore. Like, Jimmy was always exploring, so he wanted a more going another direction, and plus also he was reaching out to, like I said earlier, more races. I keep coming back to that. It's very important because, especially in today's political climate, you know what I mean? Things are like separated straight down the middle now. I mean, it's gotten real stupid now. But I mean, this is what Jimmy wanted to do. So he had the band of Gypsies is the first black rock band. So he got his buddies together to put that together. Unfortunately, it didn't work. So he realized that and moved on to another sound, which is what he was constantly doing. He was constantly evolving and constantly changing. The thing with Buddy Miles is Buddy Miles was very important to Hendrix because, first of all, as a drummer, Buddy Miles is playing drums with Jimmy playing guitar on the demos to the first 3 albums. That's Are You Experience, Axis Bold as Love, and most of the tracks on Electric Ladyland. Before you did an album, even today they do that when you sign with a major label. I was with Columbia, and I had to do this. You do demos before you do the actual song. And if they approve the demo, then you go ahead and record the song. So that's what they were basically doing with a lot of the songs, like Purple Haze and stuff like that. When you hear the demos, that's not Mitch Mitchell playing. That's Buddy Miles playing drums. And Jimmy would play guitar, and then Jimmy would later overdub the bass for those demos. So Buddy Miles and Jimmy from way back, they were a solid team. And matter of fact, when you go to YouTube, you can hear a couple of those songs, a couple of those demos. Like Little Miss Lover, I think that's still on YouTube. So, yeah, I mean, they tried something, and it worked for a minute, and, okay, that's the end of that. And they moved on,
Okay. Was this brief experiment still part of that Gergief's philosophy starting to work its way into Jimmy's life? You just mentioned that the band of Gypsies was kind of a foray into another area of exploring and branching out.
That's actually a great question, Mark, what you're asking. And I would say if it is, I don't know the relevancy of that. He met Timothy Leary in '68, and he actually did an album with Timothy Leary. Stephen Stills brought him into a session where Jimmy's playing bass on Timothy's album. And it is said that Jimmy actually co-produced the album, but it's not getting credit. But he is playing bass, and that's how he got to be real tight. And then we come to May, just before Jimmy died in September, in 1970. He's at the Village Gate, which is a jazz club, jamming with Timothy Leary. He was, I would say, by the time the band of Gypsies, he was getting more earthly. He was really starting to think about more of the spiritual things that he wasn't taking seriously in '68. Now he was starting to really, and he was starting to apply the work more in his life, more so that just before that May Village Gate date at Timothy Leary that I mentioned, Timothy introduced him to a black woman from the Gergief Foundation who was able to get Jimmy involved with the Harlem Fourth Way group up in Harlem. So he was really not only getting into the Fourth Way teachings, but now he was getting into the actual ancient Egyptian teachings. And not just the ancient Egyptian teachings, the ancient Egyptian teachings from the indigenous Africans who are still on the continent holding on to this knowledge. Now, I just have to just do a little brief, and just bear with me here because I'm going to tie this all in. There's a brief explanation here. When people come up and ask me, especially when I do the lectures, well, what is this? What do you mean ancient Egyptians? What is this like? What are you talking about? I always refer to the movie or the TV show Kung Fu. Do you remember that with David Carradine?
Right, I remember seeing a few episodes.
Okay. The episodes consisted of David roaming the world, but he would always have flashbacks of when he was in the Shaolin Monastery being instructed. That is what it was like in ancient Egypt. The culture in its golden years was ruled by the elite, the temple elite, that most people never saw. And I'm not the only one saying this. When you read Swallow de Lubic's, Renee Swallow de Lubic's books, especially from his wife, who makes it more palatable to the layman, since Renee was more very technical and things like that. So his wife, Isha Swallow de Lubic, she made it more so she put it in novel form. She put the teachings in a novel form so we can, we can really get into it like a story. And basically he documents that. So when you have Stephen Mailer and people like that, they talk about this guy, how important his work was. That's what his work does, documents the temple elite and how it guided ancient Egypt. And it's not just in Egypt. We can go to ancient India, ancient China, South America. This were all of those great wonders that we see were guided by a temple elite. So when we today, in today's American society, think about temple elite, we think about, the evil priest and who took advantage of the masses. That's how we think about it. You
Right.
know what I mean? And back then, no. They wouldn't have been able to accomplish what they did back then, especially in Egypt, which is unequal today. We today can't build a Great Pyramid. There have been top engineers who went over there and said, well, I can't do that. How do they do that? Why would they do that? Number one, it's certainly not a tomb, but why would they do something like that? We can't do that. So there had to be something that was guiding that culture, and that's what it is. Those people are still there, is my point. They went underground, but when you watch the old footage, especially of the King Tut digs, you see these indigenous Africans there. You know what I mean? They were doing the menial work, basically. Gergief took a trip to Egypt. He traveled all over. He went to, all of these famous ancient sites all over the planet. But when he went to Egypt, he supposedly had a map of pre-sand Egypt. Well, when Gergief was over there, first of all, he spent more time there than any other place he was at, something like 7 years, I believe, something like that. And how did he work? How did he, get along and feed himself? He became a guide and did the digs and things like that. That's menial work that you can only, you can be in contact when you do work like that. You're in contact with the indigenous Africans back then. So it's no wonder that Gergief came upon the fourth way, because that's how those people were. They went underground, they blended in, especially when the Arab took over Egypt. Then the British came after that, and then the French, and it got real crazy. So these people went underground. They went further south. A lot of them went further south, back into Nubia and stuff like that. But they went underground, not out in the open like they were. They're still there. They still come over here to America sometimes for the annual celebration at Prospect Park for the Star Series. So they're still active, but they're underground. And that's who Hendrix, I say that to say, that's who Hendrix hooked up with when he went to Harlem. So he actually, two singers who sang background, the albums you mentioned, have two singers called the Aleens on those records, on a lot of those records we were talking about. These were background singers, and they were twin brothers, Arthur and Alan. And Arthur and Alan, I mean. And basically, they met Jimmy. They came upon Jimmy. Jimmy turned them on to the teachings. These guys changed their name to indigenous ancient Egyptian names, Tahaka Aline and Tundara Aline, because of Jimi Hendrix. Okay, I'm friends with, one of them died some years back, but I'm friends with one of them. I'm friends with Tahaka. So basically, Jimmy was becoming deep before he died. That's why I emphasize this. We know the direction he was going. So I had to say all of that to tie that into his spirituality.
It is the backup singers, is that the ones that had the name the Ghetto Fighters?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Arthur and Albert were their, I call it government names, but yes, that's the thing, guys.
Okay. I saw that in one of the on the liner notes, and I don't know if I could. I don't want to go through all. I have like 15 CDs in a semicircle all around me. I don't know if I could go through all the liner notes and find it, but I thought I read that was their title as part of the band as the backup singers, and it said that Jimmy had known them for some time. So, okay, that's what you're saying puts all that into with the temple elites that you were talking about. That sounds like right out of the shows where Norman D. Ellis was a guest with Barbara a couple times and me once, where she's talking about the high literacy rate and all the work that the scribes were doing, and the colorful decorations on all the temples. Spoken with Chris Dunn, from Ancient Aliens, and he demonstrated the high artistic skill that really can't even be done today with lasers. I mean, this was just all precise engineering, and it seems like that's what Jim was getting into, and learning from these people who had their own little enclave of people teaching the old ways. It seems like his music reflects all of that, the ancient Egyptian cultures.
Oh, most definitely. Matter of fact, you mentioned Christopher Dunn, who's one of my heroes, who just documents, like you said, the preciseness. So it leaves no question. This guy knows his stuff, and he goes there. He's objective about it. He's impartial.
He's an engineer too.
Yes, and that's matter of fact. If you mention ancient aliens around him, I think he would. I don't think he's too crazy about that. But if going by with him, what Scott lays out, Scott's an engineer, Scott Creighton. So I mean, these guys lay it out. Just imagine what the music was like. Okay, I mean, because we know that the sacred science in the architecture, and architecture is like what they call frozen music. Just imagine. We know that Saqqara, the ancient site of Saqqara, was a healing center that dealt mainly with resonance and sound. Stephen Mailer documents this, and so does Ashur Kwesi. There's so many people who document this. We know that place, that's what it was. It wasn't a burial site only. So, I mean, just imagine what sound was used for. And this is what Sun Ra turned Jimmy on to. Sun Ra, matter of fact, if you look at the bios on Jimmy or you read certain quotes, you see people say, well, Jimmy was getting away from the antics on the stage and playing blah, 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 blah. And, yeah, for a while until he met Sun Ra again just before he died. And Sun Ra said, what are you, crazy? What better way to manipulate sound than with your body and with those tricks that you're doing? So when we see Jimi Hendrix just before he died, we see him getting back into the, the stage squats, on his knees. And so we see him getting back into that. That's because he spoke to Sun Ra about that. And, the potential of sound. Matter of fact, Jimmy would sometimes start a concert and he'd introduce his audience and say, oh, we hear blah, 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 and we can all get into love, peace, and sound. He was into sound, man. And he was into resonance. So basically, it was all coming together for him, and then the guy died. So that's the story of Jimi Hendrix right there. We're seeing a guy who came out the box swinging, really, just swinging hard and really on top, and then we see him heading downhill, and then he finds his he finds his groove back, and he's starting to get it, and he dies. That's 4 years. So, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the star Sirius. What was the well, you can follow Orion's belt to Sirius. What role did Sirius play in ancient Egypt, or did Jimmy's friends have some kind of interpretation of the star's importance?
When you say his friends, which friends specifically are you speaking about?
Like the ones who might have been giving, educating him about ancient Egypt while he was in New York.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't call them so much friends. It was a group that he was a part of for a while. But you're actually asking the wrong guy. I mean, that's not my field of expertise, especially when you have so many great people like Robert Bauval, Graham Hancock, who can really break it down for you, Stephen Mailer. These cats can really break down how important that was to the ancient Egyptians. I can only give you a background of it. I'm more, my field of expertise work and applying to the work in pop music. I emphasize pop because back in Jimmy's day, you had other groups who were involved, some of them were Gergief, but involved in spiritual teachings. You had members of the Grateful Dead. You had members of the band Yes. I can go on, Brian Eno. I can go on and on of people who were involved in actually working on themselves spiritually, but were pop stars and pop musicians. Look at the Beatles. So that's me. I don't want to go into a club and play my music or do my show in front of like 6 people who are working on themselves. I'm trying to reach the masses through popular music and the work. And when I can bring in the teachings with that, I do that, especially with my lectures. I can do that. But to get specific on things like that, we would have to, I would have to go to my notes. You would have to go to the books, and that's not really my for me to spend time on that.
The Grateful Dead played at the pyramids.
Sure.
Guess they must have been working on something similar. Let's see what. There's the somewhat recent release of Jimmy live at Maui. There's he did two shows. I just happened to look at the back of the box. On July 30th, 1970. So it's almost 51 years to the day. But that's a new release from all these archival concerts that have been rediscovered and cleaned up and released. And what was the importance of that concert in the Haleakala crater?
It was very important. Now, I'm so glad, Mark, you actually mentioned that because it was important, and not for Jimmy's performances. He hated that performance. What was important was called the Rainbow Bridge Vibratory Sound and Color Festival. That was the title of the festival. And it was put together by a gentleman named Chuck Wayne, who is also considered a wacko like Timothy Leary, unfortunately. But I don't know Chuck that well. I did interview him briefly, but I didn't know him that well. But what was important with this Rainbow Bridge concert was that Chuck brought together spiritual leaders from all over the planet to gather at this crater in Hawaii. It was important for him to go all over the world, or at least reach out to people all over the world and bring people together. He had Sufis there. He had people from China, from Japan, people from Russia, just anywhere, Africa, anywhere you can think of, gathered in one place. So now, basically, unfortunately, he's not even known for that. He's known for putting together a movie that leaves a lot to be desired when you watch it, and Jimi Hendrix's performance there. But you can get a taste of what I just said, because before Jimmy comes on, Chuck comes on stage and introduces him. And Chuck's words are, and I'm paraphrasing, so let's everybody come together and let Jimmy's music, so Jimmy can lead us across this Rainbow Bridge. That's why Jimmy was at that concert. They considered themselves going into a whole new age of having that concert in that crater because of that concert and because of a certain alignment that was supposed to take place, which I don't know if it took place or not. It was supposed to take place according to Chuck. We talked about it, a certain alignment, and Jimi Hendrix was chosen specifically to lead those people into that new age. And that's his announcement to bring Jimmy on stage. I don't know the exact words. You can Google the exact words, but that's the important words right there. So right there with what I just said, of Jimmy being chosen for that, and then this guy Chuck bringing together spiritual leaders from all over the planet. If I'm in New York City, that's why I love New York City, because when you go to Manhattan, it's like you can go to spiritual centers like from everywhere. I used to live in Little India. I used to live in the Village. I mean, just these are places that are very mystical and magical to me. So that's why I love New York, and pretty much that's what Chuck did back in 1970. It was very important. Now, the movie, like I said, when you watch the actual Rainbow Bridge film, you're like, yikes. Did these guys have too much, partaken too much, whatever, I don't know.
Yeah,
Jimmy
one
was
time's
actually
enough.
thrown in that movie. Excuse me?
Seeing it one time is enough.
Yeah, Jimmy was chosen for that at the last minute just to get sales. He was thrown in that movie by his manager, basically for sales at the last minute. But like I said, the importance of that is what Chuck did in the actual concert, which Jimmy hated. Every time it was brought up, he hated. He didn't want to talk about that concert.
I like the CD, and it wasn't too long after. What was the Atlanta Pop Festival right after Maui or earlier? A little bit earlier.
Now that's something I would have to research. I'm not too sure. I know it's around that same period. But yeah, I'm not really.
I'm trying to find the date on looking through the liner notes again. But what? that concert seems to have been another one of those very important concerts. What was the significance of the Atlanta Pop concert?
That's, again, we're speaking about another gig that Jimmy didn't think too highly of. So I don't know. Maybe you're speaking about the intentions of the actual promoters to put the concert on. Yeah, I know it was among the last of the great, festivals like a Woodstock, or I think Atlanta Pop was among the last of the American big festival. After that, the powers that be said, okay, we're shutting this whole movement down. We're shutting it down. We're not limiting it. We're shutting it down. And they did for a very long time until the MTV years, when you had the other concerts come around. But it was getting too powerful. People were becoming empowered through concerts like this. It was becoming very dangerous to the government. I actually know the photographer, Art Riley, who actually photographed Jimmy at that concert. He does lectures sometimes with me. And I know we speak sometimes about that. So I do believe it was one of the last of the great ones.
Okay, since you just mentioned your lectures, might as well also talk about your new Divinity studio and some of the projects you have going on through there. Let's make sure we leave a little bit of time to plug that. So, you're doing some teaching there, recording with students. What do you have going on?
Yeah, it's a center where I have students. I also produce clients, and so my services are listed on the site, and as well as I develop talent, I groom talent, and I present them to my top contacts. So that information is there as well, and it also has information about the various projects that I personally do. Of course, the Kiss the Sky, which is my biggest one, with that's me doing Hendrix, but I also do an Al Green show. And I also have an original project, which is a direct continuation of Hendrix's Electric Ladyland concept, meaning I work with my original project. I have all-female backup bands. I work with female energy, that energy, and it's the foundation of my sound. That's pretty much the direction Jimmy was going with his music. I know one of the bass players, Cleo, who Jimmy was grooming, one of Jimmy's proteges. And yeah, he was going in that direction. Prince actually was able to do it before he died, work with female musicians. But this is a little different, where I basically take their energy, their aggressiveness, and that empowered energy, and that's what I build my sound out of. I don't just have them come and play what I want. I basically take that and build my sound off of that. I got that idea from Miles Davis. Miles Davis, when you're speaking about the Gypsy Bleu era, he did that. He brought together young musicians, and really great musicians, but a lot of them are young, and he took that energy and created a new sound. He built off of that. That's where I got the idea from. So everything's on there. And you mentioned radio hosts. I haven't done the radio show in 4 years. But it was a very popular FM radio show, WFDU 89.1 FM out of Teaneck. The list of the people I was blessed, and I emphasize the word blessed, to interview is listed on that particular page on my site. And it's, when you go down that list, a lot of those people you see are my friends. And it's because once I reached out to them to interview them and they found out what I did, especially with Hendrix, they were very, it was a mutual respect. And so sometimes I would reach out to interview them, and their managers would say, okay, well, we'll give you 15 minutes. We'll give you 20 minutes. I get on the phone with them. I'm speaking with them for an hour. And sometimes they would tell me stuff. The manager would say, okay, you can't mention blah, blah, blah. And make sure you don't mention blah, blah. I said, okay. I just want to speak to them about the music. I don't want to about that other stuff. They tell me that in the interview. Because, like I said, there was a mutual respect, and they felt that they can go there with me. So I got a lot of information, especially about the Hendrix story. The people that I interviewed with the Hendrix, I call it the Hendrix saga. I got things that between that and my lectures, you're not going to see in any bio, any documentary. You're just not going to find it. And I have that. I still have a lot of those interviews. I have most of the interviews from there. So all that information is on my website. My website is New Divinity, S as in shine, as in from, C as in consciousness. That's newdivinitysfc.com. And you get all the information you need there.
Is your studio like set up like the Electric Ladyland or some kind of similar philosophy, or is it just more designed to your taste, or the modern way of doing recordings?
Yes, modern way of recording where I can do sound and film. That's what SFC, New Divinity Sound and Film, that's what I do. Sound and film creation, because the consciousness has to come in there. So basically, yes, it's mom and pop. I have two locations. I have the location that's on, most of it is on my website. Then I also have my other location. If you look at my trailer for my lectures, you'll see me in my other studio. That's located in New Jersey. That's really my partner's facility. So between those two places, I'm able to accomplish what I'm able to do with the sound and film. I'm totally into film. I'm doing a film now that's based on Jimi. It's called Voodoo Child, A Man and His Guitar. I'm actually in production on that. I'm shooting on that and everything on that now. That used to be a play. I used to do an off-Broadway play of that in the 80s and the 90s, and now I'm doing a film. I have a sponsor for that. So that's happening. But the lectures, you mentioned the lectures that I do, they're very important because I bring out a lot of points that people forget about Jimi or actually don't know. One example is when you listen to the people talk about Hendrix, the interviews, or you read the bios, they say that Jimi didn't connect with the black community. And that's a total no-no. Basically, I document in my lectures how, just to give you an example, when the first three albums we were just talking about were charting high on Billboard's charts, those same albums and albums after that, when he died, were charting simultaneously high on the black soul charts. That means ReExperience, Access Boulder's Love, Electric Ladyland, Band of Gypsies, the albums you mentioned, Cry Love and stuff like that. When those albums were charting like number 7, 8 on Billboard's rock charts, pop charts, and simultaneously they were charting 7, 8, 11 on the soul charts. They couldn't do that if black people were not aware or soul people were not aware of Jimi Hendrix. So they knew who Jimi Hendrix was. I also have articles of Jimi in Ebony magazine, the black magazines of the time. So that's a myth that I destroy right away. And that's why he wanted to really reach more out to more people. So that's, yeah, my lectures include that. I also document Jimmy's playing on the first hip-hop album. Hip-hop is very big today. Not album, song, sorry. Hip-hop is very big. It runs the industry today. Jimi Hendrix and Buddy Miles is on the first hip-hop record. You can hear it on YouTube, basically. And not only is he on that record with Buddy Miles, one of the seminal spoken word groups, The Last Poets, one of their members is actually rapping on that song. That's 1969. But it has...
what song's that?
Called Doriella du Fontaine. And it's about a prostitute. But I interviewed Alan Douglas on my radio show, who produced that song. Alan is responsible for introducing Miles to Hendrix and a lot of jazz people to Hendrix. And we spoke about that session and how it came about and everything. That's the first hip-hop record. When you listen to it, it has all of the elements of even today's hip-hop. The funky drum beat, the rapping, Jimmy's playing guitar, Buddy Miles is playing drums, and then when they laid that down, they overdubbed Jimmy on bass and Buddy Miles on organ. But if you listen to that song, like once again, it's called Doriella du Fontaine. That's hip-hop. And it's hip-hop by one of the last poets, which makes it even more deep. So Jimmy was there from the beginning on a lot of entry. He was there in the entry of fusion and everything. He just happens. He reminds me of Forrest Gump. If you watch Forrest Gump movie, you see Forrest is like, wow, he was there. Wow. Same thing with Jimmy.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, well, that's the only one I can think of, you know.
No, it works. And who's in your band, Kiss the Sky tribute band?
Oh, I basically have, and they don't like when I say this, but look, it's the only way I can say it. We're adults here. I have two white guys who portray Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell. I have two black guys who portray Buddy Miles and Billy Cox. I also have a full Woodstock band. Like I said, costumes, equipment, and everything. And I also, the Cry Love band with Billy Cox and Mitch Mitchell, we create that as well. And I wouldn't be able to do this recreation. Kiss the Sky I've been with for we're going on our 5th year. I've been doing the Hendrix tribute. This is my 52nd year. I started in 1968. But in 2016, I met this guy named Mike Gotch, who produced, he had a production of, it wasn't called Kiss the Sky, it was called another name, and he needed a guitar player. So he reached out to me via, I was touring with Billy Cox, so he reached out to me via Billy Cox. And that's how we hooked up. It's a marriage made in heaven. We both have the same vision of presenting Hendrix the way he's supposed to be presented. Not even Jimmy's family is doing this. This is very important to show Jimmy what he accomplished on stage as a musician, why he was important as a guitar player, because what did I mention when we first started this interview? The way the guy treated the guitar like a ritual instrument. It's very important. You know what I mean? It is very important. And it's very important for an audience to see that, to hear the sounds that he was able to get live, but to see the guitar treated this way. And basically to get an idea why this guy was so important as a guitar player. He didn't just stand up there and play good guitar. He moved, the way he moved with his body and the guitar moved with his body. He integrated the movement of his body with the guitar. Nobody else is doing today, guitar players doing today. It's important for an audience to see that. That's why Kiss the Sky is very important, and I wouldn't be able to do it without the help of the producer of the show, Mike Gotch.
Oh, Yeah, you do put on a great show.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days. And let's see what. Yeah, you've also played at Buddy Guy's Legends. What is that like playing in that famous venue? And Buddy was friends with Jimmy too. They both admired each other's work.
Definitely. Sure. Jimmy admired Buddy Guy, man. Jimmy was a sponge. He anybody who played their butt off, he wanted to get that. I call him a good thief. He was able to, I'm stealing that. I'm taking that. He was able to do that and mix it in with his own way. So yeah, it was really pleasurable to play there. It's mainly a blues spot, so we had to have a Hendrix blues set mainly. But it was fun.
Cool. What do you think the appeal is for the tribute bands? I thought the guys from Zoso were very well researched in all of the Gibson double neck guitar, and the guy who plays bass and keyboards. The No Quarter song that they do is really was a demonstration of him being a concert pianist. But what do you think a lot of these the fans are looking for by packing these parks to see these tribute bands?
They're reliving it. A lot of the fans who come to see this didn't get a chance to see these bands. I saw Led Zeppelin twice, and they were horrible when I saw them. So when I see the good tribute bands that I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with, I'm really seeing these bands at their best. So the audience is really reliving that, and it's very important for them to see that. You know what I mean? With Jimmy, it's a little bit different because Jimmy had a lot more potential than just the average rock band because of the position he was in of being a black rocker. He had a little bit more potential, like I said, good and bad, depending on who you've spoken to. So people are seeing, they have to see this. Why was he? They read about it. Okay, so why was he important? So when they come to see a Jimi Hendrix, we tried to give them that. So the audience can relive the magic and everything. It's the next best thing to see in their favorite band.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jimmy, we're down to 90 seconds, a minute or so. I just wanted to thank you for being such a fascinating historian. You put on a fantastic show. Best wishes with the Voodoo Child, A Man and His Guitar movie. Hopefully that will be out soon. You have about a minute to plug anything, and you can wrap up the show. And thank you again.
Mark, I really appreciate you and Barbara having me on this show. I respect both of y'all. I respect, like I said, I spent time on Barbara's site. I spent a lot of time going through the different, the different topics. And, yeah, you guys are really onto something. And I wish you the best with that.
Thank you so much. Okay, we might as well just end there, and we will see everyone next week. Thanks again, Jimmy. Take care. I'll see you Thursday.